Imagine looking out an airport window and seeing not the familiar Airbus, but a futuristic giant with variable sweep wings or a double-deck airliner surpassing the size of anything flying today. The history of aviation is filled with ambitious blueprints and full-scale mock-ups that promised to forever change the way we travel, yet ended up gathering dust in secret archives due to politics, economic crises, or a lack of investor courage. Have you ever wondered what the world would be like if the boldest dreams of last century's engineers had been realized in metal? What if the era of mass supersonic travel and giant aircraft had become our everyday reality rather than just a forgotten chapter in textbooks? In this article, we will uncover the secrets of 5 shopping commercial aircraft that almost made it to the runway. From the American Concorde killer to the colossal Russian airborne Titanic, we will explore their incredible specifications and find out why these technological marvels never managed to conquer the sky. To understand how these incredible machines nearly changed our lives, we need to go back to an era that historians call the Golden Age of Aviation. Picture the atmosphere of the 1960s and 70s. Humanity had just conquered the moon, and room-sized computers were beginning to run the world. At that time, progress seemed limitless. Aircraft designers weren't just working on planes, they were creating symbols of national superiority. In those years, the industry split into 2 camps, pursuing 2 radical ideas. The first was a thirst for speed. Why fly from London to New York in 7 hours when you could pierce the atmosphere at supersonic speed and get there in 3? It was like trying to turn a regular bus into a Formula One race car. The second idea was scale. Air travel was becoming accessible to the masses, and airlines needed true flying hotels. Imagine a 5-story building that you have to lift off the ground and make move at 900 kilometers per hour. Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
But if the engineering solutions were close to genius, why do we still fly on planes that have barely changed in appearance over the last 40 years? Here our investigation runs into the invisible killers of progress. The first is ruthless economics. Developing a new airliner costs tens of billions of dollars. It's like betting your entire family's fortune on a single hand in a casino. If hundreds of airlines don't buy the plane, the corporation will simply cease to exist. The second factor is infrastructure. Imagine buying a supercar but living in a village with no paved roads. Many of the projects on our list were so enormous that all the world's airports would have had to be rebuilt to accommodate them, from lengthening runways to replacing boarding bridges. Were governments ready to pay for that? Or were there secret reasons why those blueprints were thrown into the trash bin? We are beginning to examine the evidence, 5 specific cases where ambition collided with harsh reality. Each of these stories is a detective tale of how future technologies lost the battle for the present. And the first suspect on our list was meant to be not just a plane, but a true king of the skies, capable of outrunning the Earth's rotation itself. But instead of triumph, a crushing finale awaited it, one that still sparks debate among historians to this day.
Boeing 2707. The American Concorde killer that was supposed to change everything. Picture it, 1963. The Cold War is at its peak, and battles are being fought not just in political offices, but in the skies. When France and the United Kingdom announced the creation of the supersonic Concorde and the USSR began work on the Tu-144, America's prestige was under threat. President John F. Kennedy could not allow the United States to lag behind. He challenged the aviation industry. Build a plane that wouldn't just catch up to the Europeans, but would literally smear them across the stratosphere.
And so began the story of the most ambitious project in civil aviation history, the Boeing 2707. If the Concorde was an elegant speedboat, the Boeing 2707 was conceived as a true transatlantic liner on steroids. Get this, it was supposed to carry up to 300 passengers, compared to 100 on the Concorde, and fly at Mach 2.7, nearly 3,000 kilometers per hour. To grasp the scale, that's faster than a bullet fired from certain rifles. A trip from New York to London would take less than 3 hours. You'd barely have time to finish your lunch before Big Ben appeared beneath the wing. But how do you get a machine nearly 100 meters long, longer than a football field, not just to fly, but remain controllable? Boeing's engineers took a risk that would make any modern designer's eye twitch. They proposed using variable sweep wings. What does that mean? Imagine a bird. On takeoff, it spreads its wings wide to catch the airflow, but during a high-speed dive, it tucks them close to its body, becoming an arrowhead. That's exactly how the Boeing 2707 was meant to work. At low speeds, it was a regular plane, but in the stratosphere, its wings would sweep back, merging with the tail into a single steel triangle. It looked like something out of Star Wars, but in practice, it turned into a technical disaster. You know how much the mechanism allowing the wings to move weighed? About 25 tons. That's the weight of 5 adult African elephants, just riding along on the plane, contributing nothing but the mere fact of moving the wings.
Why didn't we ever fly on it? This is where our investigation gets truly interesting. On the surface, the U.S. had poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the project, and airlines around the world had already placed orders for 122 aircraft, more than the total orders for the Concorde. But the stakes kept rising. The heavier the aircraft became, the more fuel it needed, and the more fuel it burned, the more expensive the tickets became. Then came the problem of the sonic boom. When a monster of this size breaks the sound barrier, it unleashes a thunderous shockwave on the ground, strong enough to shatter windows in nearby homes. American citizens began to protest. Who needs progress if your walls are crumbling? Suddenly, the Boeing 2707 went from being a symbol of the future to a political pariah. Environmental activists and economists joined forces into a powerful opposition front. In 1971, the U.S. Senate asked itself a fateful question. Is it worth continuing to spend taxpayer money on a toy for the rich that also scares cows on farms and punches holes in the ozone layer? The answer was harsh. Cut the funding. The project was shut down instantly. Thousands of engineers were laid off, and 2 unfinished prototypes were sent to the scrap heap of history. America lost the supersonic race without even getting its star athlete to the starting line. But do you know what's most shocking? The failure of the Boeing 2707 shaped how we fly today for decades to come. Slow, economical, and boring. But if you think that this was the end of designers' gigolomania, you are sorely mistaken. Because while some were trying to outrun sound, others decided that size is what truly matters. Have you ever seen an airplane that could fit a full-sized shopping mall with a movie theater inside? The next hero of our list was exactly that, and its story proves sometimes being too big means being doomed. McDonnell Douglas MD-12, the double-decker ghost that was supposed to beat time. Imagine an airport in the early 1990s. All eyes are fixed on the legendary Boeing 747, the queen of the skies, reigning supreme over long-haul routes. But behind the closed doors of McDonnell Douglas, a conspiracy is brewing. Engineers decide, why settle for a queen when we can build an emperor? And so the MD-12 project was born, an aircraft that was meant to become the world's first full double-deck airliner, long before we ever heard of the Airbus A380.
Have you ever wondered why planes feel so cramped? McDonnell Douglas decided to take a radical approach. The MD-12 didn't just widen the fuselage, it offered 2 full decks running the entire length of the aircraft. If a regular airliner is a long hallway, the MD-12 was like a 2-story mansion flying at 900 kilometers per hour. Its specifications made competitors nervously smoke on the sidelines. Capacity? Up to 530 passengers in a 3-class layout, and if you packed it with all economy class seats, the so-called budget option, nearly 900 people could board. That's the entire population of a small village, all lifting off into the clouds at once. But the engineers didn't want to build a flying sardine can. Plans included panoramic windows, lounge areas with bar counters, and even full sleeping compartments. It was a dream of aviation's golden age, brought back to the modern world. For McDonnell Douglas, the MD-12 project wasn't just another new model, it was an all-in gamble. At the time, the company was losing market share, yielding ground to an aggressive Airbus and a powerful Boeing. They needed a coup de grace, a project that would make the world forget about its competitors. Let's compare. The Boeing 747 only had a hump at the front, which created aerodynamic challenges and limited space. The MD-12, in contrast, looked like a perfectly even, massive cylinder with 4 engines. It promised to be quieter, more efficient, and more comfortable than anything that had ever taken to the skies. Airlines should have lined up waving their checkbooks, but that's where this story hits a wall of silence.
How much does it cost to redesign the entire world for a single airplane? The answer? Far too much. Airlines looked at the MD-12 blueprints and were terrified. First, the development cost was estimated at $4 billion. In 1992 prices, this was an astronomical sum. For the project to break even, McDonnell Douglas needed a partner willing to share the risks. They approached Taiwanese investors, European banks, but everyone just shook their heads. Second, the airports of that era simply weren't ready for such a guest. Imagine trying to bring a grand piano into your average apartment through a mail slot. That's roughly what parking an MD-12 at a standard gate would look like. You'd have to replace boarding bridges, expand parking stands, and buy new tow trucks. In the end, the project received not a single firm order, not one. In 1996, the project was officially shut down, and a year later, McDonnell Douglas itself was absorbed by Boeing. The MD-12's technologies were put on a shelf to gather dust. But here's the most ironic part. Just 10 years later, the world was applauding the Airbus A380, which looked almost like a twin brother to the ill-fated MD-12. The American giant had simply missed its flight to the future. But if you think the MD-12 was the limit of human imagination, brace yourself for a real shock. Because while the Americans were trying to squeeze 2 decks into one plane, on the other side of the world, Russian engineers were designing a monster capable of carrying 1,000 people in a single trip. This project was so immense that it required inventing technologies that still seem like science fiction. Ready to see the wings of Russia that made the earth tremble? Sukhoi KR-860, the wings of Russia, the flying megacity that never took off. If you thought the double-deck MD-112 was the height of ambition, get ready. We're traveling back to Russia in the late 1990s. The country is in the grips of a severe economic crisis. The aviation industry is on the brink of collapse. And then, suddenly, at the 1999 Paris Air Show in Le Bourget, the Sukhoi Design Bureau shocks the world. They unveiled the KR-860 project. KR stands for Wings of Russia, Крылья России. And the number 860 refers to the number of passengers this monster was designed to carry in a single flight. Let's just pause for a second and let that number sink in.
860 people. That's the population of 10 small apartment buildings or nearly 30 full tourist buses. If the aircraft had been configured in an all-economy layout, the passenger count could have reached a staggering 1,000. This is no longer just an airplane, it's a flying stadium. The KR-860 was intended to become the largest and heaviest aircraft in the world, leaving both the American Boeing 747 and the then under-construction European Airbus A380 far behind. How did the designers plan to control such a behemoth? To understand the scale of the challenge, this giant's takeoff weight was supposed to be 650 tons. Sukhoi had made its name building agile fighter jets, and when designing the KR-860, the engineers came up with a solution typically found only on aircraft carriers. The main problem with super jumbo jets is their wingspan. They simply don't fit through standard hangar doors and interfere with other planes on taxiways. What did the Russian engineers propose? Folding wings. Imagine this. The giant lands, slowly taxis toward the terminal, and suddenly, like a giant bird, folds the tips of its wings upward. This would have allowed the KR-860 to take up no more parking space than a standard Boeing 747. But that's not all. How long do you think it would take to board 1,000 people through a single standard door? It would be a multi-hour nightmare. So the engineers included their own wide fold-down escalator ramps in the lower fuselage. Passengers would board the airliner almost as quickly as people enter a shopping mall. So why did the project turn into a castles in the air? This is where the story enters the realm of harsh politics and empty wallets. Developing the KR-860 required about $10 billion. At the end of the 1990s, Russia simply didn't have that kind of money. The project's authors hoped for orders from China and India, countries with huge populations where such air travel could have been a hit. But potential buyers chose to wait and see. Would Russia take the risk itself? A reasonable question arises. Did it even make sense to build such a giant? On one hand, the cost per passenger on the KR-860 would have been 20 to 25% lower than on any other aircraft. On the other hand, airlines would have faced logistical hell. What if a flight is delayed? Where do you accommodate 1,000 angry passengers in a hotel? How do you deliver 1,000 suitcases at once without collapsing the airport's baggage system? The Wings of Russia project remained nothing more than a giant mock-up and stacks of blueprints. It became a monument to audacious engineering that tried to leap across an economic chasm but fell short. The KR-860 was supposed to make Russia a leader in global civil aviation, but instead became just another chapter in the book of What If. You'd think that after the failure of such giants, the world would calm down and return to standard solutions. But no, while some measured success by the number of seats, others decided to go all in on speed. And what they proposed looked so strange that many took it for an April Fool's joke. Imagine an airplane that flies faster than sound, yet does so silently and looks like a prop from an alien movie. What is this silent hunter that nearly defied physics? Let's find out. Boeing's Sonic Cruiser, the speed rebel that wanted to stop time. Imagine the spring of 2001. At Boeing's headquarters in Seattle, there's an unprecedented buzz. The aviation giant has just unveiled a concept that made the whole world gasp. Forget the sluggish flying buses and giant double-decker monsters. Boeing decided to go in a completely different direction. Their new project, the Sonic Cruiser, looked like it had been stolen from the set of a sci-fi movie about the future. If you look at a regular airplane, you see a familiar silhouette: wings in the middle, tail at the back. The Sonic Cruiser tore up all the textbook rules. Its massive delta-shaped wings were pushed all the way to the rear, and right behind the cockpit were small extra canards or winglets. This made it look less like a passenger liner and more like a predatory fish or a futuristic fighter jet. But why such a strange design? The answer lies in one word: speed. Boeing set itself an ambitious goal to fly at the very edge of the sound barrier at Mach 0.98. For the average passenger, this meant real magic. Imagine your flight from London to Singapore or from Los Angeles to Tokyo suddenly being cut by 2 or 3 hours. In the business world, that's not just saving time, it's the chance to attend a crucial meeting and still get home for dinner while avoiding the agony of jet lag. The sonic cruiser was meant to be the sweet spot, nearly as fast as the supersonic Concorde, but without producing that terrible sonic boom that prohibited flights over land. In the early 2000s, a real drama unfolded, worthy of its own investigation. On one side was Airbus with its A380. They believed the future belonged to cramming huge numbers of people into a single aircraft. On the other stood Boeing with the Sonic Cruiser, arguing people want to fly faster and without connections. It was a grand, high-stakes gamble. Boeing was betting everything, trying to prove that time is the most expensive currency of all. Airlines held their breath. The world seemed to be on the brink of a new era where distances would finally cease to matter. But were carriers ready to pay the price for this speed? To fly that fast, the aircraft needed to burn 15 to 20% more fuel than a conventional airliner. So why did this beauty never take off? And here we come to the dark date of 2001. The events in the United States dealt a devastating blow to the entire aviation industry. People became afraid to fly. Airlines began suffering colossal losses, and oil prices started climbing at an alarming rate. Overnight, priorities shifted. The question, how fast can we get there, was replaced by, how cheaply can we do this? The Sonic Cruiser, thirsty for fuel and expensive to maintain, suddenly began to look less like the future and more like an unforgivable luxury. In 2002, Boeing officially froze the project. But don't be disappointed just yet. The Sonic Cruiser didn't vanish without a trace. All the work on futuristic materials and advanced engines that had been developed for it later formed the basis of the legendary Boeing 787 Dreamliner. So when you fly on the Dreamliner, remember, in its DNA lived the genes of that very same rebellious speedster that never was. Now imagine that while the Americans were trying to outsmart physics and fly almost fast, the East continued to dream of full-fledged supersonic flight. There, they were designing a machine meant to become a true bus for the stratosphere, carrying hundreds of people faster than sound across vast distances. This project became the last breath of a great empire and its final attempt to conquer time. Are you ready to meet the heir to the legendary Tu-144, the one that never had the chance to spread its wings? Tupolev Tu-44, the supersonic ghost of an empire that was meant to make the world feel small. While the Americans at Boeing were playing it safe in the early 2000s with their Sonic Cruiser, merely trying to tickle the sound barrier, a far bolder idea had been maturing for decades on the other side of the world. Imagine an aircraft that doesn't just fly fast, but literally compresses the planet down to the size of a tennis ball. Meet the Tupolev Tu-44, the second generation of Soviet and later Russian supersonic airliners. This wasn't just a project, it was an attempt to fix all the mistakes of the past and prove that supersonic flight could be mainstream, comfortable, and profitable. You've probably heard of the Tupolev 144, the world's first supersonic passenger jet. It was fast and beautiful, but frankly it suffered from teething problems. It was deafeningly loud, consumed monstrous amounts of fuel, and could carry a frighteningly small number of passengers over short distances. It was like a Formula One race car forced to work as a taxi. The Tupolev Tu-44 was meant to be a very different beast. If the Tupolev 144 was a test of the pen, the Tupolev 244 was designed as a full-fledged stratospheric bus. Get ready to count. Capacity, up to 300 passengers. That's 3 times more than the Concorde. Range, nearly 10,000 kilometers. That meant you could fly from Moscow and land in New York just 3.5 hours later. Just think about it. Crossing the ocean would take less time than a cross-town drive during rush hour. The most shocking detail of the Tupolev 244, one that would make any modern passenger nervous, was its nose section. Remember the famous nostalgic drooping nose of the Concorde and Tupolev 144? It was there to let pilots see the runway during landing. For the Tupolev 244, engineers decided to scrap this complex and heavy mechanism. So how were pilots supposed to land this behemoth at 300 kilometers per hour with nothing but a solid wall of metal in front of them? The answer sounds like a sci-fi script. Engineers proposed using a synthetic vision system. In front of the pilots would be monitors displaying a perfect image from cameras and sensors. In the 1980s and 90s, this seemed like magic. Essentially, pilots would be flying a giant aircraft as if they were playing an advanced flight simulator. But would you have been ready to trust your life to a video camera back when even televisions were prone to glitches?
The stakes in this game were incredibly high. The 2244 project was developed in close cooperation with Western giants, yes, even with the likes of Boeing and Airbus, because everyone understood no single country could build such a machine on its own. It was meant to be a global project for a united world. But then came 1991. The Soviet Union collapsed, and with it, the system of state funding for megaprojects crumbled. For a young Russia, the 2244 became a suitcase without a handle, too heavy to carry, yet a pity to throw away. Billions of dollars were needed to get a prototype into the air, money that wasn't even available to pay salaries. By 1993, it became finally clear the era of cheap fuel was over, and the world had shifted its focus to ecology. The loud sonic boom became a death sentence for this project. Who would want to buy tickets for a plane banned from flying over land because of the thunderous noise? The project was never officially closed for many years. It simply faded slowly in the folders of engineers. The 2244 remained the most advanced supersonic aircraft that never felt the wind beneath its wings. It became the final chord of an entire era when humanity believed that speed was the only thing that mattered. But what does all this mean for us? Are we forever doomed to fly at 800 kilometers per hour, stuck in a technological dead end? Or were these failed projects of the past actually seeds just waiting to sprout into something even more astonishing? It's time to look beyond the horizon and find out what the engineers of the future have in store for us. Are we truly going to remain stuck in the era of flying buses? Looking at the dusty blueprints of the past, it's easy to conclude that the golden age of innovation is behind us. But in reality, this is merely the calm before the storm. Right now, engineers are once again challenging the laws of physics and economics. Consider the blended wing body concept. If a conventional aircraft is a metal tube with wings glued on, these new machines will resemble giant alien rays. Such a shape will allow the transport of hundreds of people while burning 20% less fuel. Meanwhile, startups like Boom Supersonic are already hard at work building the successors of the Concorde, promising to bring back supersonic speed, but without that deafening boom.
However, the main battle will not be about speed, but about the very ability to fly. Will we be able to make giant airliners run on hydrogen or pure electricity? This isn't just a fuel swap, it's a complete reboot of the entire industry from scratch. The stakes are colossal. Either we find a way to fly green, or the sky becomes an elite privilege for the chosen few. Are you ready to take a seat on a plane where panoramic screens showing the stratosphere replace the windows?
The future is already knocking on hangar doors, and it looks even more shocking than any blueprints of the past. But which of these bold concepts will be the first to leave the ground, and which will join our list of great failures? The history of aviation is not just a list of successful flights, it's also a graveyard of truly grand ideas. We've studied 5 projects that could have turned our journeys into scenes from a science fiction movie. From the ambitious Boeing 2707 to the Russian KR-860, designed for 1,000 passengers, each of these aircraft pushed the boundaries of human imagination and made competitors tremble. So why didn't they take off? As our investigation has shown, sometimes harsh economics, environmental protests, and big politics prove stronger than the most powerful engines. But it's important to remember, none of these blueprints were in vain. Composite technologies, advanced aerodynamic configurations, and digital vision systems, all of this lives on today in the airliners we fly on vacation. These losers became the foundation upon which modern aviation stands. Which of these aircraft would you most like to see in the sky for real? Share your opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed this analysis of forgotten legends of the sky, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We regularly release captivating videos about secret developments, the history of great aircraft designers, and the future of civil aviation. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next flight into the world of aviation mysteries. Thank you for being with us, and see you in the sky.